Brandon Marcello. Look at your studio in the background. Is that like an image? Is that what that looks really nice behind you? What is that?
That's just my background, just my my desk, my little U-shaped desk I got here. It's my command center.
I love it. Now, I saw the note where you retweeted what Sankey said about the commissioner. Not a surprise. Why would they give in to anything like that? Does that thing have any chance in hell of ever happening, the Super League?
No, not right now. No. You know, it's something that we'll probably look back on in 5-10 years and go, we wish that happened as football fans, because it's very clear, not just from Sankey, when he said on that podcast earlier this week, but just the movement that's been happening with the CFP, that it's the Big Ten and SEC's house. We're all standing outside of it. And once they get done figuring out how they want to run things, whether it's through NIL, but also just how they're going to navigate the house settlement as far as just infrastructure, enforcement entities, and everything along those lines, then they'll open the doors and go, all right, guys, come on in. You can join us if you want, but you have to do things our way. And, you know, the fear out there is that that will extend, obviously, through the CFP, governance structure, and a lot of other things. And, you know, a lot of folks outside of those two conferences, the Big Ten and SEC, are concerned, and as they should be, because they're saying in a lot of ways that we're going to set the agenda here, and you've got to agree with it, or you can go elsewhere.
Brandon, I asked Tim Brando this the other day, and I like to ask all of our, you know, college football insiders this, that know Greg Sankey and follow him. But do you think that, because he'll say he has college football's best interest at heart, and then he says something like this, which makes you think, like, yes, I know that the SEC is your priority, but you don't have to have it where the SEC goes up at the expense of everybody else. Like, you can a rising tide lifts all boats if you do it right.
Right, but it also can make your boats not look as bright and shiny and spick and span when you can't put as much money into it as it would allow if you were to help the other programs outside of your conference. You know, at the end of the day, you know, we went from kind of a thinking of let's help all of college sports to let's worry about our individual conferences without really saying it out loud. And now we're saying the quiet part out loud, which is each conference is its own gated community. Not every gated community has the same size houses, and the SEC and Big Ten are the ones with the pretty houses and the big mansions, and the ACC, the Big 12, are the ones that are outside that can't really match what they have financially, and they want to use that power to structure how things will be going forward. And listen, you know, things obviously need to change in college athletics. It's an absolute mess. It's anarchy right now in the streets in a lot of ways. And I do understand, obviously, the opportunity here for the SEC and Big Ten to kind of like streamline things and then provide a structure. And, you know, we'll see what all happens here and who gets on board with it and everything. I think it still could be beneficial for all of college athletics. But the feeling out there from talking to other folks outside the SEC and Big Ten is that they're scared to interact and deal with that because they feel like that they'll just be giving in to their whims and their competitive nature. And obviously this is all a business still. You know, in the end, if the SEC and Big Ten are going to throw their weight around, it probably would be for the best of all of college football and athletics, for that matter, to get on board with whatever they're going to be putting together here over these next few months.
Brandon, we've talked a good bit about all the Pac, the Mountain West, all of that's been going on, because I just think it's that interesting next layer underneath and kind of, again, setting the table for whatever this looks like in the future. There's obviously a lot of things still being ironed out on all sides, but has anything been more of interest to you, a particular move or a particular team? What stands out to you from what matters in this round of realignment, if you will?
Well, I'll say this. I'm not surprised, but I guess I am a little surprised by just how many programs' names have gotten out there that haven't necessarily even received an offer or actually even been in serious discussions from both conferences, from the Mountain West and the Pac-12. You know, some of the schools you hear out there are more or less just showing interest, and some of it's reciprocal, some of it's not. But the reality of the situation is that both the Mountain West and the Pac-12 are kind of trying to do their due diligence in all this. they both were trying to strike hard and fast with some programs, as you saw with those American teams that the Pac-12 was talking to just a week ago or a week and a half ago now. But what is going to be really fascinating to watch when it comes to the Pac-12 moving forward is that I've reported, and I know others have as well, that they're kind of pausing advanced negotiations, whatever you want to call it, with other programs so that they can kind of go back in their own silo. They're using Navigate, which is a sports and an entertainment consulting firm, to kind of evaluate where they are right now as a conference and what kind of media rights value they have moving forward with their 8 current members. But in addition, there'll be multiple models and scenarios of, well, what kind of media value do we have if we add these 2 programs, or we just add this program as a football only member, or vice versa, or whatever. And they're going to do that. Could potentially take up till the end of the year is what I've been told. And then after they do that, they'll go back out there and look at other teams. Some programs, which have been mentioned already, could be back in the mix once again. I know there's a lot of pushback from the inner circles at Memphis and everything. They could potentially be back in the fold here in the next, few months, whenever this all gets settled with the media rights valuation. But I think from the Pac-12 perspective, they don't want to repeat history, because a lot of this, when I hear it, almost does sound like it's repeating history. Because remember, a year ago, or however long it was ago now that I can't think of it, George Kliavkoff, the commissioner at the time of the Pac-12, was trying to figure out his media rights deal and just wasn't really getting anywhere. And then in the 11th hour goes, hey, we got this deal from Apple, but that's really it. $23 million a year is what we're thinking of right now. And it came nowhere close to what the other programs were going to get to go to the Big Ten or maybe even the Big 12, and everything dissolved from there. You can't necessarily go to your programs or even maybe recruit other programs without actually having some hard numbers or very good estimations. And I think the Pac-12 is kind of in a lot of ways no man's land, as long with the Mountain West, about what exactly are they worth in this new media rights venture. They can guess and say things, but they really need to take their time and go back and study all of this before they start maybe targeting some other programs.
Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
I was going to say, do you think that there's a circle back from the Pac-12 coming on some of the teams that have already told them no, or do you think that that's not going to happen?
Never say never.
Yeah.
I was told yesterday that Memphis was out of the picture, but then this development happened, not say overnight, but it really kind of, they reevaluate things. If they were to get something that was conducive for that, because Memphis, on Memphis's end, they wanted more money from the Pac-12 to kind of help offset their buyout from the AAC. Not to say that was the only hangup, but in a lot of ways, it's very possible that they are kind of openly negotiating in the public through the media, whether it's through the Memphis athletics director saying what he said last week, or the Pac-12 saying they're reevaluating things with their media rights. It's possible. Again, never say never. You can always circle back with these programs. A press release saying we're committed to the AAC or we're committed to this conference doesn't mean anything until you actually put pen to paper.
How realignment has torched the interest in college football.
Yes.
That was already at a high level. Yes.
I hate it. I hate it.
There you go. That was my next, especially not only hate it, but hate it was in season like
yes. That. Yeah. Sorry, I keep interrupting you, but yeah,
no,
I mean,
fine.
Even just even from a workflow standpoint for me, I've got 25 games I need to break down and all this stuff. And instead I'm spending time on the phone tracking stuff down about, is UTEP going the Mountain West? Is UTSA a certain valuable option for this conference or that conference? And it's all happening in the dead heat of the season. We're about to hit the halfway point. In fact, starting tomorrow, we get 55 straight days of football, either through the college football realm or NFL, every day of the week. Mm-hmm. And we got all this going on. That's the business of college football. This is all going to settle down at some point, and we're going to have a new structure in place over the next few years. But as we all know, for the last 2-3 years, 4 years, really, it's been the most tumultuous, uncertain time in college athletics history. And it's going to continue to be this way until there's a new structure in place. What is that even going to look like? You're going to continue to see these conferences, probably not the big ones, especially not the Big Ten or SEC, continue to try to figure out ways to put them in position so that they are competitive enough to where they can stay in that group of communities, as I was mentioning earlier, those gated communities, because you might not be, the sun like the Big Ten or the SEC, but at the very least, maybe you could be one of the planets that revolves around them, and you can still be part of that solar system, so to speak.
Brandon, what do you think about the state of the Big 12 right now that so far all of our preseason votes and predictions have been very wrong? BYU's really solid. Colorado actually looks like they're getting better, which is not something that they looked early in the season. And Iowa State is just smooth right now.
Yeah, and a lot of us, including yourselves, I'm sure, we went to like the veteran teams, right, and said those are the teams we're going to favor right now. I knew a lot of us thought there would be a lot of close games. I think 7 of the 14 games this past week were all decided by one possession. But the two disappointments have been among those veteran teams, right? It's been Oklahoma State just seemingly not able to figure anything out offensively, despite having a Doak Walker Award winner back and the oldest offensive line in college football history. And then Utah, without Cam Rising at quarterback, they're a completely different team. It's very noticeable. We've noticed that the last 2-3 weeks, and then it finally resulted in a loss at home against Arizona, which is explosive and can be good, but is a little bit more inconsistent. And so it just goes to show you that in a lot of ways, you just never know what to expect in college football. But also, if you lose a really key player like Utah did in Cam Rising, it changes the outlook for your team completely. And yeah, the Big 12 is wide open right now. I still really like Kansas State, despite that loss to BYU, because as you mentioned, BYU, it just plays sound football. They're disciplined in their things, and goodness gracious, that middle 8 against Kansas State when they scored 31 points in like a 6.5-minute span. Like, how can you overcome that? You just can't with the turnovers that were going on. So I'm still a big believer in Kansas State moving forward. In fact, I think they're kind of my favorite at this point until Utah gets Cam Rising back, because Utah, I dropped 16 spots. They had the biggest tumble of any team all season in my top 25, because they simply put, they are just a completely different team without Rising on the field.
How close is Colorado to cracking that top 25? What do they need to do?
They need to win the next 2 games, in my opinion. They got Kansas State coming up after their bye week here, and they get them at home. That's a huge, gigantic game. It's the biggest game so far for Colorado and Deion Sanders in these 2 years. And if they were to beat Kansas State, I think they'd be knocking on the door, if not in. They probably will be in at that point. But I want to see a little bit more against some stronger opponents. UCF has been a little bit inconsistent, especially against better competition. They've got some weak spots, obviously, and we saw that this past week. Very impressive win. Colorado is among my top 10 performances this past weekend, but we got to see it week to week to week. I saw them in person, Colorado, in their season opener against North Dakota State. A lot of the same issues they had last year were there again, despite having different players in the trenches. But, man, they are playing better. They're running the ball better. We know they got the best player in college football, Travis Hunter, and maybe the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the country in Shedeur Sanders. But all those other pieces finally seem to be gelling together. And if Colorado beats Kansas State, watch out. That could be a team we're talking a lot about near the end of the season for the right reasons rather than the wrong reasons.
Yeah, how about you mentioned Travis Hunter? Where are you watching Ashton Gente and what he does? And, I mean, we've been on that. Craig brought him up a couple of years ago. He is just phenomenal to watch, and hopefully get some opportunities for other people to watch him.
Yeah, I know everybody's making comparisons like what kind of running back he is. He reminds me a lot of like Emmitt Smith because of his size, 5'9", but he's got some elusiveness to him to go along with that power. I mean, all the broken tackles he makes are amazing. I mean, we all kind of got to see that at first against Oregon earlier this season, but again this past Saturday, it just continues no matter the competition. It's just what he does. Man, if he stays healthy, there's no telling what kind of numbers he can put up. Not just statistically when we're like, oh, he's rushed for 2,200 yards or something like that, but go look through the advanced analytics, the amount of tackles he breaks. He's just phenomenal. The guy number 1 on my Heisman list right now is Travis Hunter, though. He's just doing things we haven't seen in college football in this modern era in a lot of ways, doing things on both sides of the ball, scoring touchdowns on offense, obviously, and then not just getting picks and getting fumbles, but like in big opportunistic moments, he has stepped up every single day, every game on offense and defense in big moments. It's he's not just putting up the numbers, but he's doing them at the right times contextually to win games for Colorado.
I have a question about the two of the three big name teams in the state of Florida are having awful years. Billy Napier is as good as gone, especially if they do in fact lose to UCF this weekend. He's probably going to the liquor store to get some gin boxes to put the stuff in his office in. And really, after that SMU defeat and now DJU's broken his finger, the offseason starts now for Mike Norvell. He's in no jeopardy of getting fired like Billy Napier, but he's going to have to make some changes. What do you see as the future for Florida and where their coaching search points? And then what does Mike Norvell do? Is it staff changes? Is it reaffirming that recruiting? What does he do?
I'll start with Florida State. I think he's got to make wholesale staff changes. I think it's pretty clear he's going to have to do that. That word's probably going to come from upon high. There's some coaches there that maybe shouldn't have even been sticking around even after last year, but a lot of them got contract extensions or stuck around after being undefeated in the regular season. So I think they got to do that. It just tells you how crazy the transfer portal can be for you, because going into this year, I don't think a lot of people would argue that Mark Norvell had maybe really perfected the portal and complementing high school recruiting with getting big time additions to the portal to make them what they were the last 2 years with Jared Verse and co and everybody. But then this year they had to replace some guys in some key spots through the portal, and it just didn't gel together. You bring in DJ Uyongole, who for whatever reason, he looks great in practice. And then when he gets out there on the field, he just has the yips. He can't convert. He's overthrowing receivers, underthrowing them, just doesn't look like the same guy. And he's been like that his entire career. So he's just not going to change. So the best thing for them to do is just to make a change in quarterback like they're doing right now, stick with it the rest of the season. Even if DJ gets healthy again, try to build to the future, and then try figuring out what you got to do with your staff. And then also through the transfer portal, because they are going to have to reload a little bit there as well. With Florida, I think Billy Napier very much is dead man walking. He would take a miracle at this point, practically winning out against that tremendous schedule. If he loses to UCF, I think the decision will be made by Sunday afternoon for him. But where would they go? I'll say this. I think Florida fans were the happiest fan base when Ole Miss lost to Kentucky this past week. Not the Kentucky fans. I think it was Florida fans, because now all of a sudden, maybe you got a Lane Kiffin who would maybe weigh whether to actually jump ship and go to Florida if Florida were to come calling, because maybe he has hit his head on the ceiling there and what he can do. They can still get in the playoff at Ole Miss. We all know that. They could still win the SEC championship this year, but man, they stubbed their toe big early, and they got a lot of really difficult games coming up, including against Georgia. And with every loss he picks up there, it makes him a more viable option for the Florida Gators.
Brandon, as always, thank you, man. Great to see you. Great to have you on. Keep doing what you do. It's great work. We appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, guys.
At Brandon Marcello, 247 Sports, on many different angles of college football. Certainly.